My fellow Americans,
what do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting, just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or at the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding this information? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun. It's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Is the US a functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They have 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem.
Ensure,
We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we will also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament, I...
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions
No,
of
I got
relevant
that.
resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of, you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Well, one of the four principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
But these were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort. Totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the Press Gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And our pronouns are question everything. Welcome to the show. We've got a very busy show for you on this Wednesday. We're going to be looking at the coming war with Iran, and we're going to follow the money because, you know, battle lines are being drawn. Obviously, there's Israel versus Palestinians, and, of course, the tempers are very, very hot. But underneath all of it, of course, is the money. And they are making money hand over fist, laughing at all of us right now, playing us like a fiddle, as Raytheon just announced new quarterly results, and war is very profitable for them. We're going to dive into these numbers today.
Plus, the CDC estimates that 71% of young people who want to join the military could not because of obesity, low grades, or a criminal record. We sure know how to grow them. In the United States, what the heck is going on with the obesity epidemic? Is it making us less safe? Other countries probably are watching this. Maybe we should not wage war around the world. We're going to look at those numbers, and it's not funny.
Also, Oregon just did the stupidest thing possible. Those dumb idiots up in Oregon. Can you believe what they're doing with the school system? We will tell you about that. Plus, Europe is facing an energy crisis. Germany basically having to turn on their coal-powered plants again because, I guess shutting off your nuclear power plants and having your friends blow up your Nord Stream pipeline does not make for a good energy situation as we head into winter. All of that and more as Redacted starts right now.
Well, not everybody is stupid in Oregon. Our two producers, David and Philip, come to us from Oregon. They are not stupid.
They're the exceptions.
Yeah.
We come from Washington. Actually.
Oh, I thought you both lived in Oregon. I thought you lived in Portland. You say Portland all the time.
No, we're like a half hour from.
They're close to Portland, but they made sure they got out of Oregon.
I'm the stupid one.
Yeah.
I should go to Oregon.
It's all good. We forgive you.
Oh man, this story is unbelievable. I mean, they tried this in San Diego school system, of course. Hey, we're not going to give away the story. We won't tell you what they're doing. But really, instead of like working on making kids smarter and identifying the areas where they are deficient and helping them, rise up and actually do better, we're just going to change the system and level the playing field, change our standards so that we don't have to worry about them being stupid. We're going to change the entire system. We'll talk about that.
What is the opposite of a commitment to excellence? Well, speaking of excellence, we want to tell you about our excellent newsletter you can find at redacted.inc. It is a companion to this show, comes to your email address every day. It's totally free. Just go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and then authenticate that you do, in fact, want the daily newsletter, and then you'll get it. Again, we don't ask for money. We never upsell you on this. There's no tier of the newsletter. The newsletter is the newsletter. That's it, and it's free.
It's free.
So,
we had 400 of you signed up for it last night.
Oh, that's very exciting. We enjoy communicating with you this way. It's a way for us to get in touch with you, but also a way for you to read these stories for yourself, because, of course, you can't come to a YouTube or a Rumble show, hear what we have to say, and then just just believe it, right? You have to read these things for yourself, decide for yourself. We appreciate a well-informed audience, and we really try to link you off to original sources when we give you this news so that you can verify for yourself what you believe. We do not repeat headlines or repeat mainstream media narratives. We just tell you where to look for the news, and then you educate yourself. So we work really hard on it. We write it every morning, and then the show comes to you in the afternoon. So I hope you appreciate it. It's a love child of Clayton and me, even though we have 3 real children.
That's right.
We have human children, and we have a newsletter child, and we have a show child. So
go to redacted.inc is what she's trying to say. And meet our love child, redacted.inc, and get it in your inbox first thing in the morning. Wow.
This is what we procreated a show for
exactly.
But it's safer work.
For your benefit.
I'm kind of feeling dirty being here now. So I
We're a married couple.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing you're up there in Oregon.
Yeah.
And you're safe.
Every night in the chat, I see somebody say, "Wait, are they married? They're not brother and sister." We are married.
Yeah, we're not brother and sister.
Yes, we are not brother and sister.
But could you imagine if we were brother and sister and married? That would be.
No, I'm not going to imagine
creepy.
that.
That's very Game of Thrones.
And populated a love child?
Exactly. Super creepy.
All right, let's get to the
let's get to the news.
The news. This is probably more uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is more uncomfortable. Well, get ready, everyone, because the plan is coming together perfectly. The U.S. is prepping for war with Iran. We'll get to that part of the story in a second. But first, war is really good for business. I don't know if you've gotten the memo or not. I mean, really, really good for business. If you are Raytheon, by the way, or any other defense contractor, you're making boku bucks right now. Raytheon held their quarterly earnings phone call. These are always fascinating to listen into. And a Wall Street analyst was on the call, as they always are. They want to know how well they're performing, of course. And this analyst, the Morgan Stanley analyst, pointed out that war in Israel and Ukraine seems like it's great for your business. Can you give us some numbers and understanding about exactly how it's going to perform? And Raytheon's executives agreed and then showed us just how much money they will make off of this war. I just want you to listen to how sort of sterile this conversation is from a Wall Street analyst and a Raytheon executive. This is unbelievable.
Christine Lewog of Morgan Stanley.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Morning, Christine.
So maybe moving to a defense question. The White House is requesting $106 billion in supplemental spending for a number of national security priorities, which includes over $50 billion in investment for the U.S. defense industrial base. Looking at this request, you've got equipment for Ukraine, air and missile defense for Israel, and replenishment of stockpile for both. And this seems to fit quite nicely with the Raytheon defense portfolio.
It's nice.
So how much of this opportunity is addressable to the company? And if the dollars are appropriated, when would be the earliest you could see this convert to revenue?
Yeah, how quickly are you going to make money
Christine,
off this?
let me start on that. So, as I think I mentioned earlier in the conversation, we've seen about $3 billion of orders so far related to Ukraine replenishment, and that's really replenishing U.S. war stocks. We expect another $4 billion of orders in the next 2 years. Yeah, most of that will play out over the next 24 to 36 months in terms of delivery. So you won't see a big revenue pop even next year from this. As we think about this next tranche, the president's $100+ billion request, which is more than $40 billion for Ukraine, what you're going to see is the same things that we have been seeing, but in much higher quantities. So obviously, NASAM systems, which is the short-range air defense system, and the AMRAAM munitions that we're using there, we're going to see those orders pick up, we would think, significantly. The same is true with the Patriot air defense system. Again, those are GEM-T missiles that we supply for that. Those are in short supply today. So again, big ramp there.
Yeah, big ramp up there. So, all of this is great for us here at Raytheon. So this is just follow the money, folks. We are all being played in this situation. You can show as many things on television as you want, but at the heart of it is the money. Follow the money. Overnight, we got our latest numbers in dead out of the Gaza Strip. That number is now over 6,000. Look at this. Beautiful Gaza Strip today. More than 2,300 children have now been killed in the bombings. there. The U.S. is openly, of course, funding billions of dollars to carry out these attacks. Just look at that. How do you feel about...
That is unbelievable.
How do you feel about this as an American taxpayer? Like knowing... I know we feel so disconnected often from these wars because, the United States is involved, I think, in about 9 or 10 wars right now. But look at the clothing of like families just like scattered throughout those building substructures. It's unbelievable. And to think that as an American taxpayer, regardless of where you come down on this and all of that, I don't care about your politics and your ideology here, but where do you come down as an American taxpayer knowing your money is going to fund this and they are laughing at you while they're doing it? And pretending that they're not doing it this way. That's exactly how it's coming together. They did the very same thing in Ukraine, of course. U.S. security assistance to Ukraine. Congressional Research Service out with a brand new report. You can see this newly published report by the Congressional Research Service. Since 2014, U.S. weapons manufacturers were enriched tremendously to the tune of $46 billion. So from 2014, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, through October 5th, 2023, so just a few days ago, the United States has committed more than $46 billion in security assistance. So that's separate from all of the additional billions we just sent to Ukraine, right? This was $46 billion to help Ukraine preserve its territorial integrity, secure its borders, and improve interoperability with NATO, according to the State Department, which of course is a giant pile of horse shit. Where did those weapons go? Where did that security assistance go? They went to Ukraine to attack civilians, of course, in the former eastern Ukraine, which is U.S. tax dollars being used to kill civilians. And of course, now over 500,000 Ukrainians are dead as a result of NATO's involvement in the Ukraine war. After the United States overthrew the government of Ukraine and installed a puppet government back in 2014, they carried out a U.S.-backed genocide on the people of eastern Ukraine. The Donbass region, of course. Those attacks lasted roughly 9 years until Russia finally tried to put a stop to it, called up their special military operation. The entire world went ballistic. The entire Western world went crazy, couldn't believe it. And now that the area is officially Russian, and it's still being attacked by American weapons today. Still, despite the fact that Ukraine has basically been wiped off the map at this point. Go ahead, David.
And still today, they are Ukraine's not part of NATO.
Right. No. Isn't it? Great point. Yeah, they still couldn't get their entrance fees through. Hey, you guys used us, created us, turned us into like basically an aircraft carrier, destroyed, 500,000 of our people. Can we please get that application approved now for NATO? Sorry. We were using you the whole time. Meanwhile, many of the shells that are being used in Gaza are manufactured by American companies. Here's just one example. These shells used to attack Gaza, and as Minpress reports, these came from the company called Woodward. You can see, and I love how long until, look at this, you can see Woodward right there. How long until these types of serial numbers and printings on these shell casings are going to be removed in the future? Because they're easily traced and tracked. We can see the serial numbers right here.
What's crazy about that is that proves that they could keep track of this stuff if they wanted to. They've got barcodes on them. So it's like, we have no way to track all these weapons going around the world. Yes, you do. It's right on the bottom of every one of your products.
It's all being scanned and brought right into the theater, brought right into the war theater. Yeah, we know exactly where the stuff is coming from, tracking serial numbers. In fact, Marjorie Taylor Greene 2 weeks ago was worried, of course, about all of the munitions and weapons that we've sent to Ukraine. How many of those wound up in Gaza already? Well, the top shareholder in Woodward, by the way, of that shell that you just saw, is Vanguard, which also has a charitable arm, according to Minpress, that has been used to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars to the Israeli lobby groups and the Friends of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Okay, that's so shocking.
Of course, the requests from Israel to bring new weapons to the region started immediately.
Did you know that the lobbyist groups in Washington that are pro-Israel really started after the assassination of JFK, because JFK was a proponent of a land dispute between the Palestinians and Israelis. And so that was something that was really top of his foreign agenda. And because he spoke on behalf of giving them statehood, they were really worried about it. Once he was assassinated, they were like, phew, that guy's gone. And so that is really when these lobbyist groups came in and said, we need to start funneling some U.S. money and garnering U.S. support.
Just add that to the list of other reasons why he was assassinated. Of course, the requests from Israel to bring new weapons to this region started immediately. Josh Paul just resigned from the U.S. State Department last week over these arms transfers, and he wrote an opinion piece for the Washington Post, and Aaron Mate points out this specific part of this post. Josh Paul, who resigned as the top State Department official for arms transfers, writes, quote, Israeli requests for munitions started arriving immediately, including for a variety of weapons that have no applicability to the current conflict. These requests deserve the attention we would pay to any large arms package, and I urge a frank discussion. My urging was met with silence and the clear direction that we needed to move as fast as possible to meet Israel's requests. Of course.
I really empathize with how that must feel
Can you
for
imagine?
a well-intentioned civil servant to just say, please, let's not do this. It must be heartbreaking.
Like, you're looking at these requests coming in immediately from Israel, and you're like, why are these why are all of these things on this list that shouldn't have anything to do with Gaza? Look, what is going on here? Why are we just approving this blindly?
Yeah.
And shut up, don't ask any questions. You're not allowed to ask any questions about it.
And I would surmise that there are more people who feel like him, peace-loving people who work inside the U.S. government than not, but they just have no power.
No,
the U.S.
they're
government
bureaucrats.
works as, these separate stations for a reason. They
Right.
don't collaborate. There's no, team culture at all. It's above his pay grade, sadly.
Sadly. Of course, if you ask these questions, you will be silenced. You'll lose your job. You'll be kicked out. He resigned in protest, and good for him. So over the past 24 hours, the United States has moved more military assets into position near Israel. The Pentagon is deploying 2 carrier strike groups, 11 Burke-class destroyers, a number of Ticonderoga-class cruisers, amphibious assault ships, THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems, multiple squadrons of fighter jets, strategic bombers, and undisclosed assets to the Middle East. And the U.S. is putting their military mouthpieces on television, of course, pushing the narrative that Iran is behind these attacks on Israel. And they're behind the 13 attacks which just struck U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. Listen to this Pentagon briefing.
Between October 17th and the 24th, U.S. and coalition forces have been attacked at least 10 separate times in Iraq and 3 separate times in Syria via a mix of one-way attack drones and rockets. So again, those are the initial numbers. We're continuing to work to CENTCOM to ensure we get you the facts on these.
These at least 13 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria, do you believe that Iran is responsible for these? Were these all conducted by Iranian-backed proxies?
Well, I think we've been pretty clear on this, and my colleagues at the White House yesterday talked about this as well. We know that the groups conducting these attacks are supported by the IRGC and the Iranian regime. What we are seeing is the prospect for more significant escalation against U.S. forces and personnel across the region in the very near term, coming from Iranian proxy forces.
So there you go. By the way, why do we have military bases in Iraq and Syria? Our military bases were attacked in Iraq and Syria. Why the hell do we have military bases in Iraq and Syria? We are in Syria illegally, so maybe you should leave. Just an idea. You're not supposed to be there. You're illegally there, by the way.
It is an illegal occupation. We showed you maps the last time we talked to Kevork Almasian. It's outrageous how much land we've just sort of taken.
Yeah, but we're there illegally, but you should feel bad for us.
It also frustrates me because every time they say that this was like a proxy of another country, that to me has become speak for, well, they're mercenaries and anybody who pays them will do whatever they want them to do. We paid them a little bit of money, and now they're going to lead us into a war. Do you know what I mean? It's like it always ends up being a proxy. It's not like Iran is taking. It wasn't like the Iranian military went in and did this. So whenever it's a proxy, I get skeptical because they can easily say, "Oh yeah, it was just a group of
Of course, you should be skeptical. Yeah, you should absolutely be questioning all of this. I hope all of us are doing that because this is all propaganda, right? And so why is the White House thrilled about supporting a war in the Middle East? Why don't they do more to prevent wars around the world? Because it's great for business, of course. Yesterday, a reporter asked White House stooge Karine Jean-Pierre why the White House doesn't do more to stop these wars. And here was her eloquent answer.
I understand you're saying that he's rallied the troops and brought allies together, and that all makes sense. But I guess, again, the origin of my question was, why aren't we doing a better job preventing these wars in the first place?
That's a good
What
question.
we are doing, and Admiral spoke to this, of course, as he talked about the Middle East, and of course our goal has always been a prosperous Middle East, a peaceful Middle East. He literally went into speaking about what the goal has been and what we're going to continue to do, make sure that there is peace, right? Make sure that we bring our allies and partners together. That doesn't stop. But at the same time, right, if Russia's going to invade Ukraine, we have to be there for Ukraine, right? Trying to take over their sovereignty, their democracy. We have to be there, right? If we have to be there for Israel as they fighting off a terrorist organization, right? Innocent people are being killed. And so the president's going to be there for that. And so, look, it doesn't stop us, deter us from what we're trying to do more broadly in having these diplomatic conversations. You saw, as I mentioned to one of your colleagues, Australia is coming. We're going to continue that conversation on how we're going to help Ukraine and continue to be partners and allies. But look.
Yeah.
She's a Death Eater.
Eloquent. Man, it's like,
right? That's exactly.
It's like, we're going to bring our allies and everything, and after you have, killed some citizens, and we're going to bring our bombs and guns to bring peace and kill a bunch of other citizens in order to get it.
Yeah, we have to be there.
We have to be there.
It's really hard to be the savior of the world.
This is how we bring peace to great democracies like Ukraine. Ukraine is a bastion of democracy. Suspend elections. Close down churches, burn books. They're a bastion of democracy. We need to go there with our peace-loving bombs. That's how we do it. These warmongering dipshits they don't want peace at all, of course. That's the real answer. She should have been more honest. It would have been great if she was actually honest for once. She'd be like, Mike, if that is your name, Mike, in the back, we don't want peace. All of our politicians are paid for by the military-industrial complex. We don't want peace. That's the opposite of what we want, Mike. Are you a dipshit? Why are you even here in this press corps?
Are you new here?
Are you new?
You don't go here, do you?
You don't go here, do you?
I feel like we're watching Monsters, Inc. It's like, hey, let's try peace, and all of a sudden we try peace, and it's more profitable than war.
Yeah, like the laugh, the laugh machine instead of scare tactics.
It's a good one. I like that.
So follow the money. The United States is funding both sides of this genocide right now in Gaza, and it's making war profiteers very happy. As we've reported, the United States openly armed and supported Hamas before, as so did the Israelis. We send money to Israel. They send it to Hamas. They send it to their mosques. We fund them. We pretend like Iran is behind all of this. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham pushing for war in Iran.
You said this week that the only way to keep the war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable, part of what you're talking about now, and that it might mean bombing their oil refineries.
Yeah.
Have you had any discussions with the Biden administration about this?
A bit. Here's my message. If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I will consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
Are you effectively poised to declare war on Iran? That's very strong language.
I am poised to use military force to destroy the source of funding for Hamas and Hezbollah.
Oh, okay. So the source of funding for Hamas, you mean the United States and Israel with a long track record of doing so? Remember, Hamas didn't exist until we basically created them and funded them.
This is like an SAT question where they're like, Hezbollah is to Iran as blank is to the United States. And you could put any terrorist organization in there. Al-Nusra, right? Yeah. If we're really making comparisons, I'll make you a chart, right? But we pretend we don't have our own proxies and then call out other proxies when it works for our proxies.
Yeah, it's like a three-dimensional chess, and they hope you don't understand how it's being played.
Yeah.
And as the Wall Street Journal points out, money that goes into the Gaza Strip is fully coordinated. This is amazing. Money that goes into the Gaza Strip is fully coordinated with Israel and the United States.
Shocked that they admitted that.
Yeah, it is pretty. Yeah, just read the Wall Street Journal piece on this. So now that we've created Hamas, as we did with Al-Qaeda, let's blame Iran. Now, Netanyahu says today, they're coming for all of us. He stood with Macron because they're trying to drum up support in Europe. Of course, Europe has been... There's been a lot of dissension in Europe right now about what's happening in Israel. So flying in to meet with Macron, to the French minister's office, their prime minister's office, and basically saying Hamas is coming for all of us, and they are coming for you in Europe next.
Test for the West and for civilization is Hamas. If Hamas emerges victorious, we will all lose. Europe will be endangered. Everyone will be endangered. Civilization will be endangered. So if Hamas wins, if Hamas loses and is defeated, then the forces of civilization win. That is why this battle is not merely our own. It's Europe's battle. It's America's battle. It's civilization's battle. It's the battle for the heart and soul and the future of the Middle East.
Yeah. Of course, at the heart of it are civilians being killed, and we don't seem to care about that at all. We are actively funding the deaths of civilians, just like we did in Ukraine, just like we've done in Syria, just like we're now doing in Gaza. Here's John Kirby asked yesterday about all of these civilians being killed. Will this continue, or is there anything we're doing to stop all of the civilian deaths?
This is war. It is combat. It is bloody. It is ugly, and it's going to be messy. And innocent civilians are going to be hurt going forward. I wish I could tell you something different. I wish that wasn't going to happen, but it is going to happen, and that doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it dismissible. It doesn't mean that we aren't going to still express concerns about that and do everything we can to help the Israelis do everything they can to minimize it. But that's unfortunately the nature of conflict.
Yeah, we're going to express concerns about it. So we'll send you our thoughts and prayers.
Okay.
Our thoughts and prayers on Twitter. We'll send out a heartfelt tweet about it.
You know what the silver lining is there is that at least they're admitting in this conflict civilians are getting hurt, and in Ukraine they haven't. You know, they haven't admitted that the Ukrainian army fires on civilians. So if there can be, at least we're getting some brutal honesty, but that sounds awful. He doesn't speak for the rest of Americans. And I don't know, just today, Israeli politicians have called for the resignation of UN Secretary Antonio Guterres for speaking on behalf of the civilian casualties on behalf of Palestinians and calling for his resignation. Well, he's free to do that. But us as Americans should call on the resignation of people who are saying meh about civilian deaths. Can't we do that?
Yeah.
It's not a meh.
No, it's not. So we want to know where we stand on this show. We are anti-war, and we are anti these globalists using the military-industrial complex to line their pockets with money and kill civilians.
Non-pacifists, peace extremists. That's what we are. We have a T-shirt.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, talking about that. Look, Philip, can you bring up the Lindsey Graham video again with no audio and look at the pin he's wearing? Is it an Israeli flag on the right and a mushroom cloud on the left? I mean, that's what it looks like.
Is it?
I don't know if you can play that.
Let's see here.
Let's take a look.
He's such a slime ball that I can't even stand to look at. I'd rather, in this shot, just look at him from the back because he is just an absolute piece of garbage.
Well, I for one feel safer because he's protecting me.
Wait, what is that? It definitely is. Can we pause it? It definitely is a.
It looks like an Israeli
flag.
Pin. Yeah.
But what's the thing?
Yeah, it looks like an Israeli flag, and then it looks like a mushroom cloud on the left,
or a Phillies logo.
Yeah, I can't tell. Well, let us know if you guys know what the other pin is.
He is the more warmonger, so it would make sense.
Yeah, he's like, I'm in favor of. Well, he was in favor of nuking Russia. So. And
also a regime change in Russia.
And killing innocent and killing Russians. Like he said, that's the best money we've ever spent. That's what he says. That's
why he makes the big bucks from the war contractors.
For sure. Well, we've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to look at America's military. Can you guess the most obese military in the world? The most unfit for service military in the world? I'll give you one guess. And let's see if you can guess what it is when we come back.
It's not the sumo army?
Actually, that'd be amazing. Can you imagine a sumo army rushing at you?
I don't think they can rush. But
it'd be thunderous.
We quit.
Yeah.
It'd be thunderous.
Right.
And plus, we're going to look at Europe's energy crisis in a moment. And Oregon going stupid, going woke. We'll get to all of that. But first,
we want to tell you about our friends over at Brick House, because you've heard about those weight loss injections that produce incredibly fast results, right? Well, they work by lowering glucose, reducing fat, and curbing appetite. If your goal is weight loss, but you're not into shots, maybe you can look into a new weight loss supplement called Lean. And here's why it's so encouraging. The studied ingredients in Lean have been shown to help maintain healthy glucose levels, help burn fat by converting fat to energy, and reducing appetite. So if you're struggling to lose weight, healthy glucose levels, burning fat, and eating less are the 3 keys. Adding Lean to a healthy diet and exercise program could be a game changer. And again, you're skipping the injectables, which we've talked about here on this show, are highly problematic and being litigated. So if you're looking for an alternative, check out our show sponsor. You can get started with 15% off plus free rush shipping. Visit takelean.com and enter Redacted. That's promo code Redacted at takelean.com. LEAN.com. Statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, and is not a substitute or alternative for care from a healthcare provider. So look into it yourself. Look at the active ingredients and see if it works for you. Again, that's takelean.com. And that transitions nicely into our next segment, because guess who is not lean? I'm going to tell you about that. Well, the U.S. wants war with China, Russia, the Middle East, but can they do that when the military is so painfully out of shape? Look at this study from the CDC. This is a new report about young people's unfitness to serve in the military. It estimates that 1 in 3 young adults is too heavy to serve in the military. That's approximately 1 in 5 children and 2 in 5 adults. They also see that 71% down there on top of the U.S. map. They're saying that 71% of young people in the U.S. would not be able to join the military if they wanted to, because they are either overweight or obese, they have educational deficits, or they have a criminal or drug abuse record. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like we really know how to grow them in the United States.
Fear our military, the toughest.
Right.
No, scratch that. The slowest? Okay, maybe the fattest in the world? Coming for you. We're coming for you, Iran.
Right.
You better watch out.
That's why we have to make such advanced weapons, because we need to depend on those and not running after people.
Right, exactly.
I suppose that's right.
Drones and stuff that we can some guy can sit there with a cheeseburger and eat and just use a joystick and drop bombs on people.
I wouldn't say that even that is dangerous, right? Because foods that cause mental slog or, impair your mental ability are still going to be dangerous for others, obviously, and for us as well. Now, further, this study says that 19% of active duty members had obesity in 2020. That was up from 16% in 2015. So whereas the lore of Steve Rogers, right, this Captain America character that we like to tout because we have the, best soldiers in the world, now it looks like being puny is the least of our problems. At this point, we would accept puny Steve Rogers, right? Because we're having the opposite effect. Right. We're going to look at that image again later. Don't you worry. Now, by current standards,
it's like looking in the mirror.
Steve Rogers is pretty fit. But now look at what it costs U.S. taxpayers because of this high number of obese service members. It says it's about $1.5 billion annually in obesity-related healthcare costs that the Department of Defense has to spend for current and former service members and families, as well as costs to replace unfit personnel. It says lost work days due to overweight and obesity or related causes is about 658,000 per year, costing about $103 million per year. They're saying like, hey, we got to make a difference. We got to get these numbers up. This is a problem. Now, We have talked about before how enrollment is down. That's something we've been warned about. This is the Wall Street Journal earlier this year, warning us that the Army says it will be 15,000 recruits short of targets. The Navy is 10,000 recruits short of their targets. Air Force, 3,000 recruits. The Marine Corps says they will actually meet recruitment target, but still admit that it was a struggle to do so. Now, according to Pentagon data, 9% of young people said that's of the U.S. population, only 9% of young people say they would consider a military service. That's down from 13%. So by my calculations, if only 9% of young people consider enlisting, but 71% of that population is ineligible because of obesity, criminal records, or education deficits, then that leaves us with about 2.6%. Right? I realize I'm generalizing from this population. You can check my math. It's 29% of 9% because 71% is ineligible. You can check it later. But by my calculations, 2.6% eligible and willing population. That's embarrassing and also not funny. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm kind of shocked that none of the psycho drugs are listed as ineligible, like the psychotropic drugs or anything. It's like, oh, those are all fine. You can be on those.
Right.
Well, it says drug abuse. What is it? How does it put it here?
So I guess
criminal or drug abuse record. But it's interesting what we consider drug abuse, because we saw recently that the military has changed its standards on transgender service members to allow certain untested drug experiments on soldiers if they want to change their gender. So I guess we're just picking and choosing. You know, you can have biopharmaceutical profitable drugs. You cannot have off-label drugs. Let's take a look at this. This is what we found earlier this year. This was from a memo that was leaked or I don't know if it was leaked. It came out in February. It includes new guidelines for transgender service members, including provisions to skip deployments, receive indefinite waivers for grooming, physical fitness, and drug testing. It says that the military may or may not offer this type of gender dysphoria care. It talked about, speech voice therapy, cross-sex hormones, laser hair removals, voice feminization surgery, facial contouring, body contouring, chest breast surgery, known as like upper surgery, that means cutting off boobs, genital reassignment or lower surgery, that means cutting off balls and penises. It says it should not be assumed that they get the full range of these, but they can get at least some of them. This is basically your clinique counter of transgender care that the military will pay for. So when you think about this, that they're actively trying to offer, and the obesity problem put together, you'd think, maybe we're busy. Maybe we don't need to spend our time cutting off penises. I don't know. Is this a priority? Now, this document,
I would argue you could probably run better.
I don't think so. Because when you cut off a penis or boobs, you are highly likely to get an infection there. I agree. You know, without boobs, it might be easier to run. But at the same time, there's a lot of problems with top surgery. You get drainage for a really long time. You can get infections there. The document even says that these cross-sex hormones come with potential health risks and undesired side effects. They say it many times. In fact, they say that when you take these cross-sex hormones, here's some things that might happen. Look at these two Roman numerals. It says you can expect body fat redistribution and decrease of muscle and onset of breast growth. So again, let's just look at, the lore of what we like to think of our strong military as Captain America. We should want to go from left to right, but instead we're going from right to left. So just to sum it up, our military is getting fatter than ever. We're going to make them more fat with cross-sex hormones. We accept that just fine. And we're going to weaker with less muscle as well. And yet still we have record low levels of enlistment. So maybe we shouldn't wage all these wars, because we need a sick day. We need many sick days. We need sick years before we are ready to go into battle. Not to mention the fact that the American population, by and large, doesn't want any more. So let me know what you think of this in the chat.
And any more
Are they going to cover?
Go ahead.
Like once somebody transitions to the other sex, they go fight a war. They're like, yeah, I didn't like fighting that as a man. I'd like to go back to a woman. Okay, here's your next year, and then 2 years of year 4 are in the hospital.
Well, most of the time, detransitioning is not covered, but I guess, if you have all the way transitioned to a different gender, you could say, I'm transitioning again. You could just go back and forth and just call it gender transition, and that's fine. But they will never call it detransitioning because they cannot admit that happens.
We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We do indeed. We're going to look at what's going on in Oregon and their school system. You won't believe what they just decided to do. It's unbelievable, really is. And we're also going to look at Europe's energy crisis and what this means for, and actually how it spreads to the United States as well. What's going to happen in Germany and Europe, shutting down nuclear power plants. And now with all the conflict unfolding in the Middle East, what happens if the Straits of Hormuz is closed and Iran closes that and takes over that control? What devastation we will see in the form of energy this coming winter. We'll get to all of that. But first, let's talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, family and financial security. The last few years have been filled with many uncontrollable and unpredictable events. We got a pandemic, we got inflation, we had wars, political turmoil, and more. This makes safeguarding our loved ones and taking control of our financial future even more crucial right now. So when it comes to investing, I trust Moomoo, our friends over at Moomoo. The Silicon Valley-based online trading platform. It's my favorite app to trade stocks and to buy options, ETFs, commodities. This is where I do all of my apps, all of my purchases, and set alerts on this system too, so that I can track all of my different stocks and the different commodities, whether it's gold stocks, oil stocks, etc. I'm a big commodities fan. Of course, commodities are exploding right now as a result of this turmoil, which is crazy. They have no account minimums, no commissions, no hidden fees, and they offer a plethora of great features to help make your investment decisions great, regardless of the size of your portfolio. Moomoo provides comprehensive research tools covering analyst ratings, financial operating data, earnings calls, institutional trackers for every publicly traded company. They also offer tons of learning resources, up-to-date market news, analyst expectations, all right inside of the app. And all of these are completely free and easy to access, making Moomoo a solid choice for beginners, advanced investors, and everyone in between. Keep in mind, it's not just about investing, it's about taking control of your financial future and yourself and your loved ones. Join me and the 20 million Moomoo users. If you sign up right now, you can get 16 free stocks, including a full share of SoFi. That's right. All you need to do is download the app using my link below. Keep your funds at that level for at least 60 days and enjoy your free stocks. The offer ends soon, so make sure you get started today. A big thank you to Moomoo for supporting this channel. Again, get up to 16 free stocks right now by going to redacted.inc/Moomoo. That's the website, redacted.inc/Moomoo. That's MOOMOO. Is Europe facing an energy crisis of our own making? Will it be a disaster this winter? Wars and crazy climate policies, of course, leading the charge on this. The German government admitting it might need to turn on more coal-powered plants because of the energy crisis. So you shut down nuclear power plants and have to turn on more coal-powered plants. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Ralph Schulhammer is an academic researcher who is one of the keenest minds covering Europe's energy hypocrisy and has been following this very closely. Ralph, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Clayton, so great to be back on, and thank you for the high praise. I hope I can live up to the expectations.
Always you do. So you watch this very closely. I know you're in Austria. You're heading off to Brussels, in the heart of it all in Europe there. So Germany turns off the cleanest form, safest form of energy in favor of the dirtiest and perhaps least efficient form of energy. And they're admitting we may need to keep these things on for a lot longer now. It's madness to me.
No, it is. It reminds me of the very, very first conversation we had almost over a year ago when we talked about these Toynbee quotes that civilizations die from suicide and not murder. And the Germans are about to find the perfection of this art form. I mean, you're absolutely right. It was always clear that the only way to replace nuclear is either with gas or with coal. Like the idea we don't have a single case globally where coal was replaced, for example, by renewables, right? Renewables can add on, but they cannot replace it because, as all of you viewers and listeners know, it's intermittent, right? You know when the sun is shining, but even there, of course, it depends on, if it's a cloudy day, if it's, depending on the time of the year. And with the wind, it's like rolling a dice. You never know when there is enough wind and when there is not enough wind. So this was absolutely clear that they will return to coal. It's going to be interesting towards the end of 2030 when they want to completely exit coal as well, which between the two of us is never going to happen. And the only thing that keeps us afloat at the moment, we are again at the moment lucky with an extraordinary warm fall / warm beginning of the winter. So climate change is saving us from our own idiotic climate change policies.
Right. Now, you mentioned 2030. Of course, that's the goal, like this net zero goal. And we're going to hit peak use of these resources by then. I guess we won't be driving anymore. Wars won't exist. And we won't need any of these things anymore. So we'll all just be living at home in 15-minute cities, and we won't use cars. We'll all be riding bikes. We'll all be just, it'll be a beautiful utopia, I guess. But in fact, the opposite is occurring. We see absolute disaster unfolding in the Middle East right now. What happens with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, the Straits of Hormuz, shutting down oil supplies to Europe? I mean, are these people delusional?
Well, let's put it this way. The people in politics are delusional. What you refer to is the International Energy Agency report, right? That basically will have peak oil, peak gas, and peak coal in 2030. Now, the problem here is their paymasters sit in Washington, so they kind of have to report something that is received well there. I'm pretty sure if Trump would come into office tomorrow, they would immediately reverse this. So I would assume that they know better, but they just say, listen, these people pay our salaries, so what are we supposed to do? Because they, of course, then use it and say, look, the International Energy Agency said by 2030, as you correctly pointed out, right, we're going to be in this great renewable transition. Everything is going to be fine. None of this is going to happen. And the reason why it's not going to happen is a very simple one, which is that we still have a huge imbalance in, let's say, the 1 billion of the wealthiest people on the planet and their energy use, which is about 4 to 5 times as high as the energy use of the other 7 billion on the planet. So the assumption that these other 7 billion will simply say, all right, we're going to stay poor for the rest of our lives, I find, let's say, a very doubtful proposition. Now, the other argument is that they will leapfrog development. So they will move from using dung and wood for heating and cooking and their energy uses immediately to wind and solar. But again, that's never happened in human history. And they again have the problem, these things are intermittent. But people need electricity, energy 24/7, 365. And the people, if you talk to people in Africa, for example, if you talk to people in Asia, they know this. So whom do they turn to? They turn to Russia, they turn to China, right? They turn to countries that can provide them with the technology that they need. So this brings another wrinkle that you mentioned also when you talked about the Strait of Hormuz. We are geopolitically weakening ourselves. Nobody wants to do business with the climate and environmental crazies from Brussels to Washington because they say, listen, you guys want to keep us poor, as you just pointed out, well, you turn on your coal power plants. They don't care about what we say, they care about what we do. And what we do, unfortunately, is 180 degrees the opposite of what we preach.
Right. It's like the rewilding efforts that we hear so much about through Europe. Like
Indeed.
We were able to, in Germany, clear cut our forests and we were able to build farms, but we want you to never do that. We want you down there in Africa to never do those things. We want you to go right to using solar and wind. It is absolutely hypocritical when they're turning back to coal-powered plants and they got to go through all of these industrial revolution and do their own thing. So Africa, you bring up Africa, I have to imagine, they're sitting there saying, you guys come here and rape and pillage our resources. We certainly see what's happening in Niger. We see what's happening in Congo. You guys come and take all of our resources. You guys set up to steal our oil, to steal our minerals, to tell us what to do. And you're seeing, of course, coup after coup unfolding now through the African continent. You see what's happening in the Straits of Hormuz. You see these countries aligning themselves with Saudi Arabia and China and Russia. I think we are at a really pivotal moment here. And I think, I don't want to be too callous and say this, but I really think Europe is at a major pivotal moment. And we're lucky right now that we have this sort of warmer fall. Maybe we'll have a warmer winter again like we did last year, but we really dodged a bullet last year. And if we get a really dark winter, a really cold winter, we could be seeing really catastrophic effects throughout Europe. Businesses closing. We could see people, being sheltering in place, not having heat on and dying. More people die from cold than heat. And this is what these environmentalists forget and don't talk about. It's an inconvenient truth. Can you talk a little bit about how severe this would be in Germany, Austria, and some of the colder European countries?
Well, I mean, the severity, as you just described, I mean, we had this over the last winter as well. I mean, as you correctly point out, I mean, the evidence is absolutely clear. For the human race, cold is a bigger threat than heat, always has been. We are actually I mean, how much fur do we have? You have a little bit more on your head than I do, but we are not well equipped for this. But I think you mentioned something that's more important, because what governments are going to do is governments are, of course, very sensitive to voter behavior. So they will always try to redirect the energy that is available to households, which is fine, right, to the average person. But as you pointed out, this means there won't be energy for industry. So people can heat their homes, but they'll be out of a job. And on the long run, that is not a sustainable process. And this is, I think, what so many don't understand. Even if we make it through the winter without people dying of freeze in their apartment, we still continue to deindustrialize, right? We still continue to undermine our economic strength. And if you are no longer strong economically, well, you get poor. So it's a very low bar, I have to say. Look at our conversation. We talk about, well, what has to happen that Europeans don't freeze to death in the winter? That would have been a discussion to have, right after World War II in 1945, or maybe right after World War I in 1918, or maybe 500 years ago in the Middle Ages. But we shouldn't have such a conversation in 2023. Right. And that already shows you the absurdity of these policies. So even if we make it through the winter, which somehow we will, because we simply won't give any energy to the industry, we give everything to households. That's not a smart policy. That's not a sustainable policy. And no matter how you slice the story, right? I mean, this is suicide in installments.
But isn't it? And I hate to be conspiratorial, Ralph, and I'll get you out of here on this. But I mean, we see what the World Economic Forum is doing and their plans and what these globalists want, right? What do the globalists want? They want to shut down farms. They want to shut down industry. They don't want industrialization. They want us to stay at home. They want us to work from home. They want 15-minute cities. They want you to order everything that you need remotely and have it delivered to your house. They don't want you to get in a car and go places. They don't want using massive airplanes for cargo and transport. And so I know this sounds like a conspiracy. It's written down in their paperwork, though.
Yeah.
So when all of these things start coming to fruition, and they've been able to infiltrate all of these different governments at multiple levels, from Justin Trudeau to Jacinda Ardern, from you name it across Brussels. These people are in place and driving these policies. I mean, am I a conspiracy theorist here, or is this actually part of their plan and it's actually happening?
No, you're not a conspiracy theorist. Let me say two things. One of them that might be slightly diverts from your view, but I think it still fits with the outcome. One, by the way, one third element I would throw in is the media. Because, of course, the media has been telling us over the last 30 years that those are the wisest of the wise, right? Justin Trudeau, what a great man. And Ursula von der Leyen and all these people, Scholz, right? These are such great people. And Joe Biden, how lucky we are that he's back in office, because now the world will usher in this utopia. I mean, we've seen what happened over the last 3 years. And I think some blame goes to the US president. But that brings me to my key point. So one problem is the media, and the other one is because it's hard for people to speak up against the media cartel. If everybody tells you these are the best people, you don't want to be the one crank that says they're not. Luckily, we have Redacted. Luckily, we have you and me. We can say they're all buffoons. Justin Trudeau is a clown. John Kerry is a clown, right? I mean this. And as I always say, if you put clowns in charge, you get a circus. So I think one step of us has to be. So it is a conspiracy, but I think what underlies the conspiracy is idiocy. And I think at some point we have to say this. I think they really believe that. But as we just read, the laws of physics will not be. This is what they are trying. And only a fool or a madman would try to deny the laws of physics. And this is what they do. And the third wrinkle of the story is also what you just mentioned, which is the world is becoming significantly more dangerous. In many parts of the world, hopefully it's not going to explode, but countries are gearing up for war. If countries gear up for war, they will not care about the climate. So we're going to be in this absurd world where some parts are basically thinking in terms of national security, while John Kerry and European envoys travel the world preaching the glories of renewable energies and how we will be off oil, gas, and coal in 2030. So we are currently having kind of politicians that live in parallel universes. I think that the universe the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians inhabit is actually closer to reality than the ones that the Americans and Europeans inhabit. And let me give you a concrete example for this. So the Americans and the Europeans ban drilling wherever possible, fracking, exploration, resource development on our own territory. And then we go out and say, we have to lift sanctions on Venezuela. We have to lift sanctions on Iran, right? We have to lift sanctions on this country. Azerbaijan, all of a sudden, Azerbaijan is a reliable partner. Listen, I have no issues with these countries. But if you go to your audience at home and say, oh, we don't need these resources because we're going to be off them in 7 years. And then you go to every regime on the planet with a terrible human rights record and say, so could you guys drill for more oil? Could you guys make more coal?
Right.
Then it's a little bit hypocritical. And as a friend of mine uses like, we try to ride two horses with one ass. Right? We say, oh, we no longer need these resources. And you see, by the way, the same. Look at the current conflict. And, whatever our take on this is from a different perspective, but just from an energy, economic perspective. So everybody is now, Hamas, horrible. We have to do something against Hamas. Cut off Hamas from money. Their main financiers sit in Qatar, who just made long-term gas contracts with the Qataris, pretty much every European country that has an LNG terminal. So instead of doing it ourselves, because there is gas in Europe, right? There's plenty of it in Europe, in Germany, in the North Sea, but we don't do it because the environment and the environment. Fine, but then don't be a hypocrite, right? You can't have it both ways. As I said, you cannot ride two horses with one ass. If you say the environment is more important for us than our security policy, then this is a decision. But don't tell people that you can have both at once, and don't tell people that we're going to be off fossil fuels in 7 years. It's ridiculous. These are statements by madmen, by buffoons. We should no longer take them seriously.
Well,
Sorry for being very emotional today.
No, it's great, and the Biden administration just confirmed what you said, which is they said they're not going to allow drilling in Alaska, even though Alaskans want drilling there. So they've shut that down. So we are shutting down American drilling in favor of going to overseas and having to spend way more money to transport it across an ocean to bring it to the United States than in our own backyard. It's absurd. It's crazy. You're absolutely right about this. Ralph, always great to see you. My two favorite phrases: you can't ride two horses with one ass, and if you put clowns in charge, you get a circus. I'm gonna put that on a Post-it note and put it on my computer. I love that.
Make sure to give me credit. Make sure to give me credit for it.
There will be a quote. It'll be Ralph's name right under quote on this day in October. Ralph, great to see you. Good luck in Brussels. Hopefully you'll kick some ass in Brussels and talk some sense into those clowns running the European Union. Always great to see you, Ralph Schulhammer. Thanks so much.
Fantastic being on. Have a great day, Clay.
Thanks so much, Ralph. I love that. Ride two horses with one ass. Yeah, that you can't ride. You can't ride two horses with one ass.
No, you cannot.
You cannot do that. And if you do hire clowns, you will expect to get a circus. Those are words to live by. We've got more news to get to here on your Wednesday. We're going to look at Oregon going stupid in their school system. We'll tell you about that in a second. But first, it's no secret, if you're tuned in, you need to pay attention to what's happening with gold prices, silver prices, because, well, look, a recession is inbound. Seeing really concerning news coming out of the housing sector also, and with U.S. Treasuries. So and everything that's happening right now in the Middle East is all spilling over into these sectors. You're seeing these sovereign wealth managers right now running into gold, buying up silver. We saw Bitcoin exploding over the past few days as well. A lot of crazy things happening right now. And why do you want your money tied to one of these fiat currencies like a US dollar or the euro or anything like that right now? At least a portion of our savings should absolutely be in metals, in precious metals, tangible assets. And so that's why Natalie and I are big proponents of investing in gold and silver. And our friends at Lear Capital can help you get set up and do this. And even if you just book a free phone call with these guys to see if it's a good fit for you, if you've got like $1,000 in your savings account and it's in US dollars, maybe it's time to convert that over to gold coins. They can store it for you, or you can store it locally if you've got a safe or whatever. Silver, obviously, really, really bullish on silver right now. The prices are very cheap. I think just a little over $20 for silver right now. And silver is not just a currency, it's also a commodity as well. So it's used in so many different electronics, and the movement towards the green economy is reliant on silver big time. So right now, if you want to go over to our friends at Lear Capital, call their 1-800 number, which is 1-800-613-3557, or go to the website learredacted.com. They have a free gold and silver investor guide that you can get so you can learn more about it. Just educate yourself on it. and that you can receive up to $15,000 in free bonus medals with a qualified purchase. They have thousands of 5-star reviews. They have a risk-free guarantee. So if you're like, hey, we're going to buy a few $1,000s in gold, and then you have a 24-hour period to make that decision. So like maybe the next day you're like, no, I want to keep my money in euros, or I want to keep my money in US dollars. Well, you can cancel the order. It's no big deal. But like I said, if you want to order it, we did. Like here's just an example of a gold coin that we have here. You go to 1-800-613-3557 or Lear Redacted. Here's one of the simple. This is from Lear. This is one of their gold. This is 1 ounce of fine gold right here. This is what it looks like. You can have it shipped right to you, or silver as well. This is a silver. This is 1 troy ounce of silver, or 10 troy ounces, of silver, of fine silver, that you can have shipped right to you. Or, of course, you can have it stored off-site. Very, very important. All of our family members do it. You can go to learredacted.com or call 1-800-613-3557. Our thanks to them for supporting independent journalism here. Thanks, Lear.
All right. Well, Oregon has decided that students do not need to be proficient in reading, writing, and math in order to graduate high school. So what do you do to graduate high school in Oregon? You just show up, I guess. Probably that's not even a requirement. The Board of Education unanimously voted to extend a pause on graduation requirements that were put in place during the pandemic. Watch how this news is reported.
For the next 5 years, high school students in Oregon will not need to perform proficiency tests showing mastery of reading, writing, or math in order to graduate. And this comes as the Oregon Board of Education unanimously voted to extend a pause on the graduation requirement yesterday until 2028. They're citing inefficiency and inequity. Joelle Jones going beyond the headlines tonight to find out what this pause will mean for students.
This is a controversial decision and one that's facing a lot of pushback. While some say the decision will lower state standards and cheapen an Oregon diploma, the Oregon Department of Education tells me this policy simply didn't work and disproportionately harmed students of color.
Okay, so this is what Douglas Murray calls teaching to the slowest kid in the class. What will happen to us all if we lower not only a commitment to excellence, but a commitment to the minimum? We're not saying we no longer have this high standard. We're saying now we have no standard. That's terrifying. We're not talking about... Go ahead, please.
This is the nucleus of the movie Idiocracy. It's like these are the decisions they started making before humanity fell to being completely, idiots. Idiots. Have you ever seen that movie?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's because it's like, think about it. If there's like, this affects people of color, instead of saying what we should do is help them more and all that. But no, let's just, if it affects people of color, let's just, take it down to the lowest common denominator and let everybody graduate without. That just makes no sense to me.
Let's figure out exactly, why are they slower? Why are they not doing as well in math?
Well, there is a lot of research about why. I'm going to talk about it later. But we're basically telling them you cannot be expected, right? And anyone else who has done well, who is a student of color or low income, is just some kind of superhero. And that's probably not you. So you should not try. Now, we're not talking about competing with China or Japan or Russia right now. In fact, though, did you know that wealthier parents in the United States are paying extra so that their children take Russian math? This is now a new explosion in popularity is this Russian math. Here's the Wall Street Journal in February saying how Russian math became a must-have extracurricular for overreaching students. Now, this is because we have realized that our own educational system is so substandard that we have to look at how other countries continue to have a commitment to excellence because we can't trust what our system has now. In fact, whereas there is a commitment to excellence in Russia, we have none, right? We're saying no commitment to excellence, no commitment to anything. Many of these U.S. parents are just tired of the politics of education, and they want their kids to have a solid education of topics without a discussion about whether or not you can absorb those topics based on your skin color. Now, this revives the affirmative action argument. The Supreme Court just this summer struck down affirmative action this summer, and liberals framed this as a way that disadvantages people of color, like they cannot succeed without these leg ups. I like this take on it. This person on X is saying, well, now the most privileged MFers, I blacked that out for you, on the planet has decided that historically disadvantaged people. Oh, I didn't. I left one F.
You
Sorry.
left one F. I noticed that. I was like,
You're like, did you? I just took out one. We're light on the F's today. One of two F's. Okay, so I'm scoring low at copy editing. And this person below saying no person of color will be able to succeed in a merit-based system is not the flex you think it is. Meaning, like, you're not really showing yourself compassionate. You're showing yourself that you have racism against expectations, right? This is what we call, what is it called? The bigotry of low expectations.
Right.
When you say to people like, oh, you can't handle it, poor you, we're just going to lower the standards for you so you can get by. What liberal places have collectively decided is that being compassionate means letting people rot and become slugs and never inspire to do best. It means telling other people who are different than you that they're too dumb to meet the standards that you should be able to meet. Like, oh, this is for me, you poor little person of color. It's not for you. You run along and drink a Gatorade and you wouldn't understand this, right? That's racism at its core. And again, I concede that a lot more opportunities for academic success come from parents who can pay for SAT prep classes, Russian math, tutoring, families where the child doesn't have to babysit the siblings and can instead study. I concede that point. And those children should have access to academic success. So we have an educational program that favors the wealthy. We can think about changing it without actually hurting the underprivileged kids, not zero expectations so they never succeed. Like, you just have in your head this idea that one child who is told you need to watch your siblings while your parents work 3 jobs and make dinner, so don't worry about studying ever, because you'll pass anyway. Is that child going to do well in the world? What's that child going to be motivated to do when they say there's nothing, no standard you have to meet, just be a laborer for your family, do whatever you want, watch as much YouTube as you want. Again, this is not a problem of low expectations. It's a problem of no expectations. And once again, this bastardizing of the educational system came to us under the auspice of emergency. The standards were dropped during the pandemic, and it looks like in Oregon they will never come back, because what happens in 2028 when this extension, the 5-year extension, expires? Are they going to be like, oh, well, everyone's done much better now with no expectations, we can start testing them again? Of course not. It seems to me they will never start testing them again, never set standards again, much less standards of excellency. So now we have to collectively decide, especially as we think about America competing on the global scale, do we stand for excellence or do we stand for subpar? And maybe because we don't seem to be holding ourselves to high standards to compete in the global economy, that's why we need to bomb everyone else so that they can't compete either. Let us know what you think of this.
It's amazing. I wonder what these politicians are thinking, right? Because there's no emergency anymore. So what is the point of them extending this pandemic era provision to 2028? Under what auspices can they sit there and say, we need to extend it just simply because their test scores are low? Because
it's racist, because we can't expect underprivileged kids to meet these standards. Again, it's a textbook example of the bigotry of low expectations.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, you think about, you as a parent, do you want your child to have it easy? Because does that set them up for a successful life? Now, this is something we talk about all the time. It's like we need to prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. And I had a parent-teacher conference recently with something that my daughter was struggling with because she was moved into an advanced class, and the teacher said, do you want to move her back so that it's easier for her? And I was like, no, let her struggle. Let her fight for something. Let her know what this feels like, right? And if she doesn't succeed in the way she did in the other class, she'll know what it's like to work for someone. Why would I do that, right? As a parent, that's like the worst thing I could do is put her back where it's an easy A. And so
Einstein said he wasn't smarter than other people. He just he spent more time in the problem. He spent more time than other people did in the problem, working out the problem, doing the hard work, basically doing the hard work. So if Einstein can say, I'm not smarter than this person, I'm just putting in the time, the attention, and effort to actually get the work done.
What were you going to say?
Well, I just wanted to say, like, if we were being completely honest, with this, and let's say it was actually a legitimate thing, it wouldn't be color, it would be class. Because it's a class of people, not a color of people that are having these issues. And I also blame the teachers. Teachers just aren't making things learnable, in my opinion. I mean, it's like you have teachers that are in there more focused on their TikToks than their students.
Well, there are many problems with public education in the United States, and we could break that down. But do we then just pull the rug under these students and say, well, there's too many problems, so we can't expect you to learn, so just show up, right? Yeah. And so then you think of it as a city taxpayer. What are you paying taxes for into the educational system if they are not going to produce an educated generation?
This is really going to be an exodus. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing an exodus of families from Oregon moving out of there saying, we're not going to put our kids through this school system anymore.
Right, because this is a cheap degree. It doesn't mean that they worked hard. It means nothing.
How are you going to go to university? People, universities are going to look, oh, you have a diploma from Oregon? Sorry.
Right.
This is worth, bring me a roll of toilet paper. That's probably worth more than
it's like
diploma.
Growing up in California, there was this lore about Chico State because it was such a party school that there was rumors that it would lose its accreditation because people were so committed to partying there. I don't know if that's true or not. It was just like the way that we talked about Chico. Like you could lose that a degree from Chico would be worth nothing, even if it's like a cheapened degree. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, this is like they have the mandates for the mask, and the masks cause speech impediments in children. And then all of a sudden this is like, they're like, okay, so all the children that got speech impediments from the mask wearing, we cannot help them speak well because that's goes against the mask mandate. So let's just send them through life with speech impediments because,
Yeah.
It's so.
I mean, I am going to suggest to you the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. This is a textbook example of this. We are coddling our children, and it will not go well for them. So let us know if you agree or disagree with our take on this.
I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger on, was it Joe Rogan the other day, or he was on Howard Stern or something. I saw it was suggested to me on YouTube, and he said, we're raising a nation of wimps. We're raising a nation of wimps right now. He's worried we're raising a nation of wimps, and I think it's so sad. We're just lowering the standard. Imagine like the pole vault or the high jump. Oh, you can't jump over that high jump? You know what? Don't worry about it. We'll just lower it about a foot. We're just going to chop off the top of it. We're just going to lower it about a foot.
Well, you'd lower it a foot, but then call it a foot higher.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, it'll still be 7-Eleven, but we're going to lower it to 6-11 because you're a winner.
That's hilarious. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's a foot higher. Anyway, let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Thank you guys, all of you, for subscribing to the channel. It's totally free to subscribe to the channel. And whether you're on YouTube or Rumble here, watching us live at 4 p.m. Eastern time, thank you guys so much. We do have a Plus Club. So if you would like to support independent journalism and take it to the next level, again, we are only supported by you guys. We don't have George Soros or Jeff Bezos or, Rupert Murdoch money or anything like that. We are independent journalists, and we are supported by you, the viewers. So if you'd like to, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, support our Plus Club, where you get access to exclusive content, interviews, live streams. In fact, this week we're doing a special live stream just for members only, where we're going to be doing a whole bunch of, it'll just be like a hangout. We're all hanging out just with members, because we're going to be trying out some new software and new stuff here in the studio, building out a new studio setup, and we'd love to invite you to hang out with us while we do that. So, but only for members. We're going to keep it kind of private just for our members. Come over to redacted.inc and click on the Plus Club membership, the VIP membership, and if you're on Rumble, you can click that join button right there on Locals, and it does the same thing. And you can join us for the price of a cup of coffee once a month. Support our show, and really, it really goes a long way to help us. So thank you so much for supporting this show. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back here tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern time, guys, as we continue to watch this on the doorsteps of Armageddon with these crazy warmongers. So we'll be back here tomorrow.
Well, that's ending it on a cheerful note.
Well, we have to navigate it, and we have to watch these guys. So we have to call them out and, demand a change. throw these politicians out of office, demand a change. You know, when the squad tells you, when AOC tells you that she's anti-war and Bernie Sanders says they're anti-war, and then they openly vote for this is time for us to throw these people out, throw these bums out.
They are liars.
They are absolute liars. I love the guy, by the way, did you see the guy that stood up at the Hillary Clinton speech yesterday?
Oh, and heckled her about...
And was like, it wasn't even heckling. I mean, it's even wrong to label it heckling. He was literally saying that this is hypocrisy. You're a warmonger. And called her out on this. Maybe we'll show you that tomorrow on the show. But it was
and I love when the person they're calling out is like, meet me afterwards and I'll sit down and I'll have a civil discussion with you. Yeah, right.
Right. She says to the guy, meet me outside. Like she's going to go beat him up. You know, like, call your friend Mike Obama, Barack Obama's wife. Anyway, we will see you guys back here tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Bye now. Have a great night.